Hello, everybody. Welcome to Getting Your Data Foundation Right, Learnings from the Field. In this session, we're going to talk about ways of working and ways of organizing teams for success when it comes to one of the most critical elements of digital transformation, which is just making sure that all your ducks are in a row with regards to data. So we're going to start by looking at some different operational models to run a DMP or a data management platform. And then we're going to hear from Chris and David from ObservePoint and Suncorp, respectively, about data governance. And then we'll hand it over to Lena from Spark, who's going to walk us through data-powered personalization and their journey. And I think you'll see a common theme as we go through these different sections in the next 75 minutes or so, which is that it's a combination of people and technology to lay an effective foundation for your data. So let's jump into it. My name is Matt Skinner. I work on the product marketing team for Adobe Audience Manager, which is Adobe's data management platform. I'm based in San Francisco, so it's a real pleasure to be here in Sydney with all of you for Sydney Symposium. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll cover a few different topics. First, we'll talk about why DMPs like Audience Manager need a center of excellence or a COE. I'll provide some steps that we've seen our customers take that can help you create your own COE, and then also talk about some call to actions and key takeaways. And although the content here is going to focus on data management platforms, I think you'll see that it can really be applied to a lot of different systems that you might be working with when it comes to data foundations. So first, why does a DMP need a center of excellence? Well, it really comes back to what the promise of a DMP is. How many folks in here are working with Audience Manager currently? Okay, and how many folks are working with another DMP? Okay, so we have a fair amount of folks, and as anyone who's purchased a DMP knows, the big promise is to help you break down those silos within your organization, right? Data lives within different groups, whether those are media teams, CRM teams, site personalization teams, and so on. They're each working on different use cases. They each have different metrics. And the key is to break down the silos so that everybody's working from common definitions of who their audiences are so that you can create great user experiences across the entire user journey, so that you can level up to use cases that are mutually beneficial, like audience activation, testing, and so on. And so by its very nature, a DMP is about getting teams to collaborate in new ways, democratizing your data, democratizing your use case and your insights so they can be shared across your entire organization. And that lends itself to a center of excellence to help facilitate that collaboration. So some of you who've purchased a DMP might have been in this position where it's like, okay, I bought this thing, now what? Where do I get started? And so we're going to go through the 3 steps that we've seen a lot of our customers take to stand things up and be successful. The first is alignment with stakeholders within your organization. Next is organizing the work that you need to do. And then finally, organizing the team that's going to do that work. So let's start with stakeholders. We all know that DMPs have a lot of different capabilities, from identity management to leveraging data science tools, working with second and third party data. And there's all these different features that underpin these capabilities that you could take advantage of. And when you look at everything in aggregate, it could be pretty overwhelming to know where to begin. And at the same time, these capabilities power all of these great use cases that everybody in the organization is excited about, whether you're thinking about expanding reach or doing a better job delivering great experiences or driving efficiency in your paid media. So it can be tough to know where to start. What we encourage our customers to do, and what we've seen a lot of customers have success with, is taking a step back and recognizing your own unique situation at your organization. So understand what your goals are. Why did you buy the DMP? What were the chief things that you were trying to do? Was it to support media? Was it to support site experience, inform audience insights, maybe all of the above? And who's in the driver's seat? Who led the process to pave the way to get a DMP in there? Was it the media team, a CRM team, maybe IT was heavily involved? And also, what's the current state of your data? This is a critical step to essentially do an audit or an inventory of the data that you have available from a first-party standpoint. So is it not being taken advantage of at all? Maybe some teams are taking advantage of the data that they have at their fingertips, but it isn't being shared very broadly. Or maybe actually you're in a pretty good place and you're ready to just hit the ground running. It can be tough to know what your next steps are. So what we encourage customers to do is to ask questions of themselves and also of the stakeholders that they're working with. Ask, what do you want to achieve? What's important to your BU, to your division of the organization? What do you need to do before you get started? What are some of the things that you're currently doing that you'd like to do differently? What are the things that you can take, the actions you could take that are going to have the quickest impact? This can help with the prioritization of use cases. And then what's the data that you're not using that you'd like to tap into to inform some of those personalized experiences? Ultimately, the goals that you set are going to determine the roadmap, the workload, and also the team that you need to build to support those goals. So that's why it's critical to get the stakeholder alignment before you jump into organizing your work and organizing your team. So once you understand what you're trying to achieve, it's time to take the next step and organize your workload. So just in standing up a DMP, you have some of these foundational work streams. So moving from left to right, the first thing is you need to integrate your inbound data sources, your first-party data, to make sure that you're capturing all the key elements that you want to build audiences from. Then setting up trait creation and taxonomy, segment strategy, resolving identity, and then integrating destinations so that you can activate your data in different platforms. The important point here is that each of these tracks are going to be very related, but they're often going to require different skill sets. And so the individuals who are involved with inbound data integrations might be very different than the people who are doing segment strategy. On the one hand, it might be a sort of a technical team that's building these integrations, and on the other, it might be folks who are building personas for broader marketing purposes. So it's going to be difficult to find one person to do all of these things very efficiently. And this is why, again, it comes back to that COE notion, where you're going to have to collaborate with different folks within your organization to find the best path forward. The other key point is this workload is going to be driven by the different use cases that you've prioritized when you aligned with stakeholders. So for example, the way that you're prioritizing these 5 steps is going to vary if you're doing site personalization first or media optimization first. On the one hand, with site personalization, inbound data might be a very, very critical step. On the other, if you're doing media efficiency use cases, integrating destinations with all of your DSP partners is going to be absolutely critical for success. So this is going to vary based on the needs of your organization and based on the way that you've prioritized your workflow. That's why we encourage customers to develop roadmaps. So there's quite a bit on this slide. I'm not going to go through everything, but the purpose of this is to give you kind of an example of a roadmap that might be useful. So up at the top in blue, we have what's essentially DMP maturity use cases. Starting from implementation and building out your first test use cases, over to an example use case of expanding reach with some of your marketing initiatives, to prioritizing efficiency and insights from those initiatives, and then finally internal coordination across your entire organization. And then on the left side in purple, what we have are those foundational work streams that we just looked at on the previous slide. So if you take one of those work streams, for example, let's look at segment strategy about halfway down on the left side there. You can see how on the different use cases and the maturity model, as that advances, the type of work you're doing for segment strategy is going to evolve. So you might start with CRM segments as sort of your starting point because that's data that's readily available for you. Then over time, as you go into reach expansion use cases, you start using lookalike modeling so that you can build out modeled segments and find more people like your best customers. Then you might, as you pursue efficiency goals, look at media exposure segments. So building segments off of media exposure data that you collect through pixels. And then finally, as you coordinate internally more broadly with some of your teams that might be involved with marketing strategy, looking forward a year, 3 years, 5 years, building out segments based on personas that are going to be relevant to them as well. So the key point here is the roadmap is going to evolve, and the incremental steps that you take along the way are also going to evolve as your use cases grow over time and you involve more people within the organization. And that leads to this point that the roadmap is dynamic. So we've seen customers revisit their roadmap on a quarterly basis. I've talked to some customers who do this on a monthly basis. The things that are going to change over time, the way that you prioritize use cases might shift as different stakeholders have competing priorities and you decide, okay, let's shelf the personalization use case for now and focus on the paid media optimization use case in the short term. Your prioritization may also shift as new features get released in the DMP, new features that you want to take advantage of that you think are going to have an impact. And then the milestones might change as well as internal priorities shift. The other thing that's going to change in the roadmap is new work streams. So as you have more people working with the DMP, we see a lot of companies start to build out standard operating procedures to make sure that everybody's working collaboratively in a way that makes sense and there's consistency in things like naming and taxonomies. So once you've organized your work, then it's time to organize your team and think through the types of people that you need to be involved in your center of excellence. So when it comes to operating models, we like to think of things sometimes on a spectrum where on the one axis we have flexibility on the x-axis there, from autonomy to totally standardized, and on the vertical axis, focus, whether that's specific to an individual BU or enterprise-wide. So one example of this would be a decentralized structure. Here, you have multiple users of the DMP, perhaps organized by different business unit, by different traditionally data silo, and each of them are working autonomously, leveraging the DMP for their own needs. This is where a lot of companies start. But as you have more and more people using the DMP within your organization, as your use cases mature, we see a lot of customers move towards more of a centralized model, where there's more standardization as different teams are collaborating and they're thinking about things enterprise-wide. So in this model, an extreme example would be you have one team working on the DMP. They're taking inbound requests from different stakeholders, whether that's media teams, CRM teams, and so on, and they're helping facilitate those requests. What we often recommend for a lot of our customers is this notion of a hub and spoke model. And we'll see a couple examples of this in just a moment. But even the hub and spoke model can evolve over time to meet your shifting priorities within the organization. So here's how that's played out for a couple of our customers. We have a leading international hotel chain. The way that they're doing this is they have multiple sub-brands that are tapping into the DMP. Those would be the spokes. And then the hub is a single instance of audience manager that's facilitating data transfer among and between the brands. At the other end, we have a leading consumer electronics company that has different instances organized by region around the globe. And what they've done is they've standardized the data sharing between those different instances as a second-party data hub. So it's really going to depend on your organizational goals and your preferred ways of working. Every company has a different culture. In terms of the people to staff your center of excellence, the specific roles are going to depend a bit on that operating model we just talked about. But we typically see this notion of having a core team of people and then also an extended team. And so the key point here is it's a combination of business skills as well as technical skills. So on the technical side, maybe you have product managers who are helping integrate the DMP with all of the other systems in your stack that you're using. On the business side, project managers to help make sure that everything's advancing according to roadmap, data managers to make sure that you're building the right audiences as appropriate. And then it also makes sense to often get an extended team of folks involved as well. So here you might have optimization experts, data governance committees, if you have that within your organization, a team focused around privacy issues, for example, and then broader technology folks. Now, a key point here is this is going to vary for every company, and this doesn't mean that you need 10 full-time employees to staff a DMP. But these are the types of roles that we've seen some of our customers speak about when they talk about staffing up their COE. And it could be, the project manager is only spending 10% of their time on the DMP project, and they're also working on other projects at your company. Or the product manager, this is just one small part of their job. Or maybe you have a couple people who are digital marketers who are focused on the DMP. The key point is these are the types of roles that they might fill. When it comes to the cross-functional project team, typically the stakeholders in that team are the people most impacted by the use cases that you're trying to solve for, whether that's personalization team members, media team, CRM, and so on. Then there's the stakeholders that sit around them. So these would be individuals who are involved, maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but check in on a regular basis. And then you have a steering committee, which is generally executive sponsors. So here's how those roles and responsibilities break out at a more tactical level. So what we often see is the core project team is owning the roadmap and the project plan. They're doing administration and training. They're helping communicate across the org. This is where your project and your product managers might sit. And you might have involvement with subject matter experts from the relevant teams using the DMP. Then the stakeholder group, they might participate in monthly readouts, and this is where you might pull in IT teams or legal individuals from your legal team to help weigh in and make cross-functional decisions and help define some of the use cases to pursue on the roadmap. And then finally, you have the steering committee, who may also participate in those monthly readouts, help keep things on track, break down roadblocks, and also sign off on any cross-functional decisions that the core team and the stakeholders might be struggling with. These are typically executive sponsors. So there's no single right answer to forming a DMP COE. As I've tried to emphasize, it's really going to depend on your company needs and the use cases and the culture and ways of working within your organization. But a few tips to keep in mind as you go through this journey. The first one is keep an open mind. So just as a DMP is supposed to break down silos within your organization, it's important to keep an open mind that new ways of working may need to evolve over time to accommodate this new approach to managing data. Try, learn, adapt, and repeat. The key takeaway here is that what's working today or what's working next week may need to be tested and optimized over time, just like many of your marketing tactics need to be tested and optimized. But in terms of ways of working, it's important to be nimble. Success comes in many forms. We often see customers who are eager to get a 10% increase in media efficiency after they buy the DMP, and that's important, but it's also equally important to define steps along the way so that you can celebrate and understand how you're progressing against that goal. So in order to get to this bigger vision, what are the incremental things that need to happen before you reach that point when it comes to building out integrations, when it comes to getting the right data into the DMP, building segments, and so on. And then finally, be ready to continuously evolve. As your roadmap changes, as your use cases expand, your ways of working will also need to accommodate that expansion. So now that I've covered off on the DMP COE aspect of things, I'd like to invite Chris and David up, who are going to talk about data governance for digital interaction and conversion data.
Thanks, Matt. Great. It's great to be here. As Matt said, my name's Chris. I'm also from the States, made the trip, got in 2 mornings ago. I yawned about 10 times there. It wasn't personal, Matt. I'm just still kind of waking up, or getting tired, actually. I'm excited to be here. This is an exciting topic for us. It's one that I've been a part of for a long time. I was sitting there counting up. This is my 12th summit. I was at Omniture way back in the day in downtown Salt Lake. Then when we got acquired by Adobe, was at the summits down in Vegas, and that's where we're at now. And this is our third year out here. And it's really exciting to see the transformation. It's really exciting to see the growth and the investment that each of you are putting into truly creating amazing digital experiences for all of your users and your customers. A little bit of background about what ObservePoint is. The founder of Omniture, which then became Adobe Analytics, the creator of Site Catalyst, John Pastana, created ObservePoint after he exited and left Adobe. He created really with one purpose in mind, and that was to go in and validate the very complex implementation of Adobe Analytics, the product that he built. We know that the Adobe Analytics is really the Ferrari of the analytics and the marketing, really to build your data platform. It is the Ferrari of cars. And in the same way that you wouldn't take a Ferrari to a inexpensive Jiffy Lube or whatever they have here you're going to take it to the dealership. In that same way, that's the way we treat Adobe Analytics. We make sure that we're getting the very most out of our investment and that it's really tuned and we're taking advantage of every single aspect of that fast car. So I'm going to talk today, and fortunately we have the help of David Goods from Suncorp to walk through what Suncorp is doing, how they're leveraging what we call the data governance framework, and how they're leveraging automation and technology to automate the QA and validation of all of their deployment of Adobe Analytics. So before I go to my next slide, do any of you know the name Ron Popeil? By show of hands. Oh, this is great. Ron Popeil is 85 years old. He's been on TV on infomercials since I was a little kid, and you might recognize his face when he comes up here. He is the mastermind behind selling you all those kitchen appliances that do all these random things in your kitchen. He did coin one very important phrase that maybe we've heard before that has been used to other places. It's set it and forget it. And so if there's one thing that I can encourage you to do, it's remember that phrase and take something back to your teams and to your companies that has this idea of let's set our data governance and then forget it. Let's set up the right automation, the right checkpoints, and then move on and work on making better insights and creating better experiences.
How's it going, Ron?
How you doing?
Ron Popeil was out in Boa.
He's the best.
Set it and forget it.
Forget it.
Yeah. He's out in Boa. He's in Hollywood. We say, hey, what's up with you? He goes,
5-in-1 cooking system.
Wait a minute. Is this the one where you put the turkey in?
it's the one with the turkey.
Yeah.
It's a 5-in-1 cooking system.
So he says,
It does a 15-pound turkey in 46 minutes. And the machine is smaller.
Then the turkey.
done the turkey.
It's amazing.
So we say, hey, pitch something to Harvey. He says, okay, well, here's the thing.
He's got to first figure out how the machine is smaller than the turkey. And to do that, you got to watch the infomercial. And the infomercial's running right now.
And he says,
But wait, there's more.
He said that. No way. Did he
said it. Yeah. He says,
It bakes bread. It fries. It steam fries. And it cuts a cow in half, and that's no gold.
Yeah, because I want to bake bread out of the same thing I put a raw turkey in.
Will you clean it, you idiot?
Nice.
Thank you, Ron.
So just a fun analogy there from the leading source of news in the United States, TMZ. But really, before we discuss anything more about setting it and forgetting it and leveraging automation, it's important that we identify the challenges that we face as marketers. We're every day and every year challenged to create better and more unique experiences for all of our users and customers. We learn about it here on stage at Adobe. We're challenged by our competitors to up-level our game and by our own bosses that are challenging us to create more leads and make more sales and hit these monumental targets and goals. All of these decisions are driven by data. This is the 21st century. This is all ad spend is driven by really understanding our customers better. So let me walk you through just a few of the challenges that we all face as marketers. First, well, I'm calling these data governance challenges. First, all of our customers, all of our users, all of our visitors are across and spanning different, all the different websites that we create and across all the different apps. All of these channels are always they're always evolving. We're always creating new experiences going through QA, pushing them to production, and then the cycle is just really endless, okay? On top of that, we have numerous vendor tags, Adobe Analytics being a primary and very expensive and worthwhile tag, but we have hundreds and even thousands of other tags deployed. CBS has, I think we did an initial scan a month or two ago, and they have, I think, 56 tags just on their homepage, and each one of these is very important to them. So that further complicates it. And to make it even more complicated to do QA across all these different environments, each of our users and customers is coming to us from different browsers, different versions of those browsers from different regions in the world. So as you're seeing here, this really is a perfect storm of complexity. All these different challenges that are thrown at us, it makes it very difficult to QA important, expensive technologies that we're deploying in all these environments. So the current solution is very manual. It involves opening up some source code, having someone on your team, or maybe outsourcing this to another team where they go line by line and look for specific evars, props, variables that are set to collect different things. Very time consuming, and again, it's prone to human error. The other thing is it's not consistent. Who really wants to do this on a regular basis, every 2 weeks or at every push? And then also it's just not comprehensive. As I said, there's all these different environments. It's just not reasonable and really not realistic to adequately test the way we need to. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can set up some automated scanning. I'm not going to walk you through the details. This is more of a high-level presentation to get you to think about data governance, so I'm not going to show specifics. Obviously, come talk to us after. Come see us down at the booth. We're the yellow booth with the socks. The socks have nothing to do with what we offer, but it just, every time someone comes in our booth and asks about the socks, I say, this is why we have the socks. And then setting up some critical journeys, learning how we can walk you through examples of how large enterprises are testing very critical journeys that they care about, checkout flows, application processes, subscribes, and then also doing regression testing, identifying what was pre-launch and what is actually being tracked post-launch. So to do that, we're very lucky, and I'm very grateful to from Suncorp to walk us through what they're doing every day. And David Goods to the stage, please.
Hi, everyone.
So we won't have a live Q&A, but if you do have any questions, David is going to make himself available. I'm available after. But David, why don't you give us just an update on where Suncorp stands from the analytics team, what your role is, and what your challenges are there.
Thank you, Chris. So it's great to meet everyone, and I think what I'm most excited about is to see that a topic around data foundations has attracted a full house. If I think back 3-4+ years ago, my background's very much e-commerce, on-site optimization, data, analytics, insights, and I've moved more into the under the hood, the capability, as the title says. And I think over time that's been a very much an unloved part of what we do. But with the advent of insights getting to the fingertips of marketers in an easy way, AI, machine learning, people have started to realize that if you don't have this foundation right, if you don't actually trust in your data, then everything else comes crumbling down. So at Suncorp, we obviously have many brands, many products, and we collect a hell of a lot of data. And so it's important for us to make sure that we've got a way to consistently collect that across the organization so we can make that meaningful and put it into action.
Yeah, that's great. And we're lucky to have Suncorp here. They're one of the pioneers really in stretching themselves and really incorporating and infusing their teams with this framework. So walk you through really quickly the framework. We're going to spend just a few minutes on each of these. I'm going to give it a brief overview of what it means to us, each of these different areas, and then David's going to actually talk about what their team is doing in that area. But again, my goal is that you just take one or two key things away of what your team can do better to incorporate some of these best practices into your day-to-day routine. Some of the outcomes that we anticipate and that we have seen with brands, really these 6 things are the key takeaways that if you were to say, what is the outcome of all this? I'm investing all this time and technology into these tools, but by incorporating it into a data governance framework, this is what you'll get. Trusted analytics, confident execution, a really defined workflow with the right people assigned to the right tasks. In turn, because your data can be trusted, more powerful marketing, increased efficiency, obviously by leveraging automation, that's a natural result, and then really measurable results, getting the most out of your investment. So first we talk about plan. Plan is a fun one, right? This is where you get to sit down and map back specific business questions that you want answered by data back to specific evars, props, and variables. So this is what you'd call an SDR or a tagging plan. And the idea here is that this doesn't just live on one person's machine, but this is more an interactive document that lives in the cloud that can be accessed by multiple teams, including those that are performing QA, potentially across the world or just in the office next door. It's and I think one important part of this is really understanding what is on your site. A lot of times when we first engage with a brand, they're shocked when we do a comprehensive audit across all their website to find all these different tags that they didn't even know existed. We're collecting data about their customers. And so when we're in this age of GDPR and we're in this age of privacy and really understanding what vendors you're having on your site, it's important to understand that. And then lastly, you're going to take this plan and use this plan to compare pre- and post-production environments. And that's crucial. So you make sure that you're actually tracking what you intended to track. So David, Talk to us a little bit about what Suncorp is doing under this plan stage.
So I think plan is an interesting one because I think it starts out with the best of intentions. And I think when we talk about a solution design, every organization is going to be a bit different. You might collect screenshots of the intended customer experience that is being built. You might annotate that with all the props and evars and the data points you want to capture. That's just for one product. Then comes along digital marketing, that it's important for them to build audiences, measure conversion. So they overlay additional technologies on the top of that. And then you put that out the door. It's this shiny, fantastic analytics design that everyone can refer back to know what's being tracked. Well, that was 3 years in the past, and actually, when we went live, we had to make that last minute change because that wasn't right. And we were going to go back and update the documentation, but we were busy, and suddenly you now have this document that is very, very dated and doesn't actually get maintained over time. And additionally, one of the big challenges, I think, is that when you do a solution design, it's at arm's length from your QA or your automated testing, and so they're not able to work together to actually validate that you have the right thing being captured in place. So I think when we talk about plan and when we look at the way we plan our analytics, trying to find ways that you can integrate the plan with the automated testing is where you can create a lot of power, I think.
I really like what you said, keeping the planning portion away from the QA team. We've seen that before where if we involve the QA team in the planning phase of the business requirements we want to define and collect, a lot of times they will really look after selfish interest because they know they're going to have to go in and QA all of these different variables and all these different tags that are out there. So I like that point. So jumping over into the next step, which is comply, and this works very closely with plan. Here, it's essentially, and these really could go together. Plan and comply work very closely together, but it's making sure that you're basically doing three things. That you're certifying your implementations that they meet privacy, vendor, and internal business requirements. And so we can break these down in greater detail. It takes a while, but it's really important to remember that there are certain privacy laws and things out there that we need to abide by now as marketers, and it's slowly kind of creeping outside of just EMEA. The other thing I was going to mention on this one is the ability to set custom rules that define specific actions to ensure that you're deploying Adobe Analytics correctly. That's something that we do every day with brands that invest in Adobe. And then also the cross-team coordination. So we've actually noticed some legal and HR teams that are requesting specific approval or even a digital thumbs up that they've checked certain things to make sure that they're not in violation of any GDPR regulations. And then rule-based scans. So like I said, just really defining what those internal requirements are and making sure that they're being collected correctly. So David, talk to us a little bit about comply.
So with compliance, I think for me, people that have got OCD-like qualities would get a bit of a kick out of the compliance side of what a tool like ObservePoint can do. Quite often when we're implementing tags, it's very much a case of just paste this code. It was generated by a third-party tool. We hope it'll work. Or you might be using a TMS that templates that, and that's fine for today. But we all know that change is the new norm. And so with the alphabet being a very scary place for us in this industry, we have GDPR, we've got Apple ITP. What was fine today won't be fine tomorrow. And are you going to continually go back and audit the tags for compliance to make sure that they match the right version, that the best practice to implement, say, a Facebook tag hasn't changed? It's very impractical to just be able to go back and look at those things manually. So that's where vendor compliance, just knowing that you can automate a way to validate that the tag you put in a year ago is still valid and implemented correctly is quite useful. But the real power, I think, is in the business compliance. So ObservePoint's not going to know the business context. I mean, Adobe and Analytics doesn't know the business context, you do. So you need to be able to apply that business context to your compliance when you're validating your data. And so there's basic forms for that. It could be that you need a tag, you need to validate that it fires across the whole site or under certain conditions. But you may need to be able to qualify that revenue is being set in a tag, or that a particular purchase ID always starts with a certain prefix because it gives you the assurance that it's being set correctly or at all. So being able to set up those sorts of business rules when you're automating testing gives you a lot of power to make sure that it's all correct. And there's a lot of flexibility in there as well. While you may not need to write code, you can actually do those sort of more complicated regex expressions to make sure date formats or time formats are all being collected in the way that you would expect.
Great. The next step is develop, and this is where the handoff happens. This is where the business requirements are defined, and it's now handed off to a team that will actually develop and deploy this technology in a live environment. The one thing I'm probably going to just focus on right here is a use case of a very large customer stateside that has cut back and drastically reduced the amount of total time spent on QA. Well, what they've been able to do is leverage the an API or ObservePoint API to audit as they're actually deploying their data layer. So actually, as they're writing code, they can actually see that everything is the way it should be. So there is no need to do QA within their data layer. So that's kind of next step, and that took a little bit of custom work, but it's something that's out there that's being done. David, walk us through the process of when you're actually define these business requirements and hand them off.
Yeah, I think the big challenge around develop is that quite often if you need to make a major upgrade, let's say, for example, you hadn't, probably a few years ago now, but migrated across to the app measurement library for analytics, or there may have been some other libraries you needed to move across to. But knowing in doing so, you may actually bring down your entire implementation or introduce many bugs. So quite often there's going to be a laundry list of things that you need to check across your websites and your applications. And sometimes that could be prohibiting you from making the change. And the last thing you want to do as an organization is to be held back from keeping this technology up to date for fear of interfering with your data quality capture. And one example I wanted to call out is that I remember the days a few years ago where we would all collaborate when we were doing QA for change. We would have something like a Google Docs sheet open with the list of all the evals and props and all the global rules that had to be set on every page, or the specific values we wanted to capture on certain interactions, and then a list of all the brands and products and applications you need to check it for, and it was just all hands on deck going through this list and making sure we had everything covered. In spite of all of that, we would still have certain things that would slip through, and there was one example of we call it a ClickTail integration ID. So if you use ClickTail for heat mapping and you use Adobe Analytics, no sales plug here, but you can actually connect the two together and see that integration between online website behavior and the actual heat maps that correlate with, high bounce rates, for example. Now, we didn't check for that ClickTail integration ID, and it's the type of thing you're not going to notice post-production until someone, and I'm sure there's plenty of digital marketers out in the room that are going to shed a tear when I talk about the fact that you get into work on a Monday morning, you see maybe a monthly report that's looking suspiciously low for conversions and find out, the tag fell off. Why did the tag fall off? Oh, well, there was a design change to the landing page 3 or 4 weeks ago and no one had noticed. So things will always slip through, and the more automation you can put in, especially at that develop stage, it can be caught before it even goes out the door.
Love it. And this is the real sweet spot for ObservePoint and for just leveraging automation. These next 2 steps really, and 3 steps actually, really leverage and harness the power of automation and doing things that humans can. So in talking about QA to us is in a pre-production environment. When we say validate, we're talking post-production, where you're testing live environments. But QA really should be done, obviously, before you push anything live, just so we're clear. But it's really really defining and having a more efficient process to QA across all apps, devices, and browsers. And we've been able to do this, and all of us should be doing this across all of the different devices, Roku, Apple TV, any sort of an OTT device, obviously across all of your different apps and all the different browsers. So jumping over, David, walk us through, this is something where I think you and your team you're pretty advanced in this area.
Yeah, we certainly have high aspirations. And for a while, we've been running things like ObservePoint automated testing and human testing in tandem, just to make sure. And the ClickTail ID was the example where ObservePoint caught it, we didn't. But I think when it comes to QA, we want to be able to remove the human side from it as much as possible and let it do its job. So I mentioned before about that scenario of many websites, many props and evars. I think the real power there is by being able to build rules in the tool that don't require a significant amount of coding. We're not talking Selenium scripts here. We're talking about an interface where you can set up a journey, capture all the behaviors and all the tags that need to fire along the way, and then set rules that dictate what tags it should find and what types of details the tags should look for. And what's really exciting, I think, is the power of being able to leverage APIs. You could write your own API and you can interface with ObservePoint, but they've also sort of done the hard work for us as well, in that there's an add-on you can use within Google that can suck all of the information from ObservePoint out, and if you need to apply a rule across the board, it's almost as easy as filling down the column and making the changes where you need to. So for us in a QA space, to say, well, we've got all these rules we need to test at scale, we can build out that whole environment, that matrix, if you will, in a spreadsheet and have that apply to the platform.
Great. And jumping into validate. Again, this is post-production. This is something that this is where regression testing is so important, really comparing what was pre-launch and now post-launch. And this is where you're really getting into setting specific journeys that are ongoing, that aren't just something you're testing once in a pre-production. And this is also where you can test, like David was mentioning, specific activities, clicks, and actions. So if you want to ensure that, I know we have a customer, a very large credit card company, probably the largest in the world, every 15 minutes they will run a complete journey through each of their credit card applications from start to finish. Every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because for them, it's that important. They're investing so much money and so much ad spend into funneling people to those experiences. It's a paramount for them. So that's one example. But David, give us kind of an update of what Suncorp is doing under this Validate.
So with Validate, everything I described before in that UET region, many hours spent, many Maconas, or for the hipsters in the room, 3-quarter lattes with aura cleansing sprinkles on top. You have to go and do everything you did in that UET region again in production. And I'd like to see a show of hands, how many people here would be using, their websites to collect interaction data for their customers? How many people have tags, have analytics on their sites? How many people, just leave your hands up in the air if you know changes go out the door and you kind of just hope for the best that nothing breaks? Yeah, so I shouldn't have left my hand up actually, because admittedly nothing's ever perfect and we're not completely there yet, but with the ability to build out journeys across the board, build out rules, we remove that hope from the equation, and we know that when a change goes out the door, if something really goes wrong, A, it would have been caught earlier in the steps, but B, we would get emails in our inboxes alerting us to the fact that there's a problem.
Yeah, and that's crucial. I think as marketers in general, if I just zoom out of the framework here, I think it's really important for us to be credible with our data. And so when we have our teams that are relying on this data, I think we all laugh because it's true. It's very complicated, and we hope things don't break. But we've seen organizations really transform to where upper management and analytics teams truly believe that their data is within the 90-95 percentile of accuracy, and that's what we're shooting for. 100% might be unreasonable; it probably is. But if we can get up in that 95% range, that's great. We've run audits on websites where they have Adobe Analytics where they thought it was on about 95% of their pages, they're at 60%. So it's incredible to see. And on some of that 60%, they had duplicate tags that was counting Adobe Analytics twice and incurring multiple server calls just in one page. So there's a lot of that needs to be cleaned up. And I think that just further empowers us and justifies for additional headcount, additional budgets to create new experiences if truly management and our teams feel confidence in that data. So jumping to the last step, and that's really the idea of just ongoing refinement and really maturing our data governance practice. One thing I'll call out here is the ability to schedule site-wide audits pre and post-production. Again, this is that idea of setting it and forgetting it. This is the idea where you're automating all the different the capabilities that the ObservePoint platform has. So while there might be one person on your team kind of organizing and working with ObservePoint, it's really doing the work of 10, 15 different QA individuals. And we've seen that. Texas Instruments has actually gone on record and done a case study with us where they, before engaging with ObservePoint, they were working with, they had 6 individuals in a room in their Texas office they were doing QA all day, every day for 3 years. And I can't imagine the turnover in that position, but regardless, they were dedicated to making sure their data was right. And after bringing on ObservePoint, it allowed them to free up those positions and focus more on focusing on insights and driving additional campaigns. So leveraging automation is crucial at this point. So David, walk us through what Suncorp is doing to build out data governance looking forward in Monitor.
Yeah, so for us, the monitor side of things is very much future looking, and we're currently going through a project at the moment where we're auditing everything we have in place, making sure we have the journeys, the compliance rules, the understanding of what we want to have measured is actually correct and aligned. And of course, if you do that, you're going to build trust, knowing that data collection is robust and really tight. There's one example, because I think there's actually some untapped value in having tools like this that we didn't even realize realised when we first set out it was about data quality. But there's been conversations such as, we don't think Adobe Target's actually running on the site all the time. We think that, there might be certain scenarios where it just intermittently isn't firing on the page. Well, instead of launching this massive investigation, it's purely a case of saying, well, let's set up a journey, let's visit the homepage every 15 minutes, let's make a rule that says, is Target there? Does the inbox have this name, or does it have these parameters? And let it run for a week. And you very, very quickly and easily, after probably literally spending 5 minutes, more time talking about it than doing it, you get a strike rate of how often Target's firing. And it was so minuscule, there was no need to talk about it further. And you can do the same. Quite often there might be intermittent problems with your analytics where, for some reason, the page is firing, but it's not including certain data points. You can start to validate and confirm that that's there. But the most exciting thing for us looking forward is about, there's a lot of talk, and there's been a lot of talk over time about democratizing data, and that's obviously crucial to put data in the hands of your marketing teams, your insights teams. But there's actually a step further you can take. I don't know if this is a common problem that other people experience, but it can happen where over time you set a tag on a conversion point 3 or 4 years ago. The experience itself hasn't been designed. The tag's just collecting the conversion as it is, but no one actually remembers what that label was called and what that conversion ID was, and we've got to go back and look through. Well, it's actually possible that if you have a plan that's integrated with your journeys, that's integrated with these compliance rules in a tool, you can then take all of that data out and start to democratize what's in the plan and what exists. And what I'm excited about down the track is to have a data health dashboard. It's hopefully going to be a sea of green that lists out all the journeys we have and all the data we're collecting and whether it's correct or not. And I know that when I go to work on a Monday morning, I open this dashboard and I see green, I'm going to have a good week. And the other part of it as well is that when you can actually then start to socialize that dashboard with the community in your organization. And if data is important to them and understanding what's captured where and how, so they can then go and create reports, particularly in ad tech or in other technologies, you can then zoom in on the dashboard. You can expand a part of the customer journey and say, well, for this brand, for this product, at this conversion point, what technologies are here? And see the list of technologies, and then go even one step further and say, well, what's the label for that conversion? Because I just can't for the life of me find a record of it anywhere. We've got documents, I mentioned the document that 3 years ago has become out of date. Well, dusty documents that are static, that never get maintained, are a thing of the past. Let your compliance rules, let the thing that's built within the tool that validates things are correct right now be your documentation. And that's what I'm most excited about on the other side and future looking for this tool.
Great. Thanks, David. It's just really awesome to have a customer come and be very transparent. I really appreciate that. So again, just summarizing, we truly believe that these 6 things, they come to pass when you truly implement a framework that really focuses on driving higher data quality and trust of your analytics data. By show of hands, how many Adobe Analytics customers do we have here? Okay. Well, good news. We are one of the only, if not the only, technology that's currently integrated with the Adobe Marketing Cloud. So if you haven't already seen this, there is a light version of our solution available to you right now in your Adobe Analytics account. If you have any questions, you can talk to your Adobe account manager, or you can come down to our booth. We can show you, but it's basically called Adobe Auditor, powered by ObservePoint. And there's a lot of things you can't do. Obviously, we want to give you a trial version of our technology. And this is available to you right now. And you can go in there and play around and set some audits and look at some initial results that come back. And we encourage you to do that. If you have any questions, obviously reach out to us. But we really thank you for your time. And David, thanks again for coming out. And if there's one thing you can take away, just remember that really cheesy phrase, set it and forget it, and burn it into your brains that it's something that is important to your organization. So with that, we'll hand it back to Matt. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Really great to hear how the principles that Chris outlined behind how the ObservePoint ensures that you're getting the most out of your investment in analytics can come to life with the examples that David provided from Suncorp and the work that they're doing together. So next, we're going to invite Lena Jenkins up from Spark to talk about their journey with data-powered personalization with a focus on the work necessary to deliver personalized experiences.
Thanks for the introduction, Matt. So as I said, my name is Lena Jenkins. I'm from Spark in New Zealand, and my role is Data-Powered Customer Engagement Lead. So what I'm going to cover today is a bit about personalisation and sort of our definition of that. And I'll talk you through our journey to personalisation. It has been quite a journey over a few years. And then finish with a bit of a scorecard around what we've achieved, some examples, our lessons learnt, and a playbook. So first of all, who is Spark? We're in Australia, so I don't expect you all to have heard of us. So Spark New Zealand is a large telco in New Zealand. We're one of the largest. We're a little bit like Telstra, but a whole lot smaller. We started off as a government department. We actually started off as part of the post office, and originally with landlines, eventually broadband, but now we're expanding more into digital services. So our business is changing along with our customer needs. We've got around 2.5, 3 million customers and around about 5,000 employees. So that sort of gives you an appreciation for who we are, what we do. So first of all, personalisation is very much expected today. As consumers, we expect that if we go to a website regularly and buy some particular thing, that you'll remember my order so that it's easy, it's fast. You'll remember my credit card details securely so that I don't have to enter them every time. When I've got a spare afternoon and I feel like I've watched everything on Netflix, Netflix will give me a recommendation for some cool new thing I can watch. We expect all that. As businesses, we also want to deliver personalised experiences for our customers so that we can drive better customer engagement and increase revenue. So over the last few years, many of you will have been to conferences or read articles or blogs that have used the 3 words across the bottom. Cross-channel's been talked about a lot. Omni-channel has probably been one of the most overused words in the last few years. And personalisation comes up a lot as well. Really, they're all variants on the same thing. It's all about delivering contextually relevant experiences at each moment across the customer journey, regardless of channel or device, which is, I guess, a longer way of saying those words. But personalisation takes hard work. There is no magic silver bullet. There is no solution that if you implement it, you can push a button and be fully personalised. Sadly, it doesn't work that way. Personalisation requires a strong backbone of data, analytics, and solid practices. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about today. So, like I said, I'm going to talk through our journey to personalisation. Now, this is not necessarily a blueprint. You'll have probably some different challenges, but hopefully I can give you some ideas for some things to think about and consider before you leap into this. So where we started was with education and buy-in. So we had a few conversations with different people across the business. We understood what the possibilities were with technology, and we started with a draft roadmap. This here was actually our draft roadmap in 2015, and we've actually pretty much implemented that way. And so in terms of the education and buy-in, we had to start talking to people about personalisation, what it meant, and the fact that there was going to be a lot of work involved. There were a lot of expectations that it was something that was quite easy, or we could just turn it on, and there's a whole lot more work involved than that. Once we started to get some buy-in and some people supporting what we were doing, the first thing we did was around our digital data foundations. So we implemented Adobe Dynamic Tag Manager to centralise our tag management. We also re-baselined our digital analytics. Now, we had Adobe Analytics or Omniture since 2008, but it hadn't really had much love since 2008. So many parts of our business had actually given up, stopped using it, and had quietly got Google Analytics up and running. And the instance or the setup we had for Adobe Analytics was just not really helpful to anyone. So we just re-implemented the whole thing and started from scratch. We needed to do that. One of the next things that we did was introduced A/B testing. Now, this was a really important practice to actually get our business to think more about data-driven decisions. So prior to this, we used to spend a lot of time making decisions about our digital experience. They were probably more opinion-based, more emotion-based. I mean, I can tell you about meetings that I had with some senior people where we debated whether something should be pink or orange. So, quite a different world. So the first test, that we started with was actually one button in our online shop, which is the one highlighted in red there, buy now. Now, in our old world where we made things based on what felt right, well, that seems right. You're in an online store, surely it's buy now. So we tested 3 other options: learn more, see plans, shop now. The experience that actually won, that had the most customer engagement, was see plans. Customers weren't quite ready to commit. They wanted to know a bit more information before they would buy. Now, see plans had an 84% lift in engagement. We wouldn't have known that if we hadn't run that kind of test. We probably would have carried on with buy now because it made more sense. So it was just the start of starting to educate people on the importance of data and making decisions. Then what happened after that was, when we had one of those discussions where someone's saying, well, I think we should change this, or I think we should do that. It's like, well, let's test it. Let's, let our customers tell us what they want, what's important. So after this one, we started, testing other things, testing more complex journeys, to the point where we tested our whole homepage. Now, this was an interesting one. Our homepage had been hotly contested real estate for years, which you can see in how long it was. There was so much on the page. It was so busy that one of the common feedback from our customer was, I can't find what I'm looking for. Every part of, well, not every part, but a lot of the parts of the business wanted to put stuff on the homepage. In fact, we had contracts with certain phone manufacturers that included them having real estate on our homepage. It was hotly contested. So we started thinking, well, hang on, is this really what our customers want? And started thinking maybe there's a better way of doing this, and we sort of mocked up quite a radical departure from that. But we knew that if we just presented, hey, we're going to have this very simple homepage, that there'd be a list of, no, that's not going to work, and here's why, da, da, da. So we ran 2 other versions as A/B tests. One was more of an evolution from that page, so still a bit on it, but an evolution. And the other one was a radical departure. We set up lots of metrics underneath to make sure we understood what that change meant for online shopping, what it meant for self-service, what it meant for all the different things you can do from the homepage. And the result, this is the new homepage. That's it. There's no more scrolling. Very simplistic. Search box, some quick links, it's a menu. And with that one, just to give you an idea of some of the results, customers were 25% less likely to quit the site once they landed on that homepage. Your homepage is like your welcome mat. You want people to carry on and do other things on your site, so that was good. We increased traffic to the shop part of our site by 55% for people researching mobile phones. As a telecommunications company, that's quite an important one for us. But we also improved self-service transactions. Now, most of our traffic to our site is actually our existing customers, so that was a really important one as well. One of the other things we had to solve was customer identity. So in the past, we had multiple customer identities that had grown up based on different products and sort of what segment you belong to, because they were created in silos. So if you're a particular type of customer, you might have one login, another one might have some other login, or one customer could have multiple logins if they had multiple products. But really, we needed to understand customers holistically if we were going to personalize their experience. So we created a single customer identity. So we have a Spark ID, which equates to you as a person, not you as a customer number or you as a particular product holder. It's you as a person. And then customers can then associate all the products and services that they have, but also some of their relationships. If you manage your elderly mother's account because you need to pay the bill for her, Well, you can associate that and you can add that, and that way you can just log in and pay that bill. If you've got kids and you worry about how much data they use or something, you can associate that as well. There's one place to manage it all. And then there are roles that signify what that customer has access to. So you might be an end user of a corporate account. So perhaps you shouldn't see the bill, but you should know how much data you're using for something, for example. Another thing we had to do was consolidate self-service. So being a legacy large organisation, we had a share of silos in the past, and sometimes those silos created things separately. So we ended up with a few different self-service applications for different types of customers. Now it's pretty hard to surface up a personalised customer experience if you've got one place you log into, and then if you want to do something else, it's another thing to log into, and maybe you don't have a login, and that's not great. There were no journeys between those self-service applications. So the first thing we did was consolidated the consumer and small business self-service. So if you had mobile and you had broadband with us, you could see it together, one place. And then the next thing we've done is implemented cross-site authentication. So our corporate and enterprise customers can access functions that might be available in the consumer and small business self-service. So that was another really important thing for change for us. Now we finally get to laying the foundations for personalisation. So there was a whole lot of foundational work that needed to occur. But we're still in foundation. So one of the first things was to determine the important metrics and dimensions to track for personalisation. If you're embarking on this, don't try and work out all of them for your entire site all at once. You'll be there forever, and by the time you do anything, it will be out of date. So what we did was, where are we going to focus? And for us, we actually started with our smartphone app, and what are the important metrics we want to start with. We also needed to set up our data layer to track those important metrics and dimensions, so we made sure that we were actually gathering the data that we needed. And then we created some different authentication states. This is something you'll probably be familiar with Amazon, where you come back and the site knows you, but if you want to do something, perhaps you have to log in. So we created some states from unknown, this is the first time you're visiting us. If you're returning, we've seen you before, so we might give you something a bit more familiar. You've previously logged in, so maybe we can greet you by name, and then you're actually logged in. And then the other thing we did was set up our segmentation and audience manager, which you would have heard a lot about in the last presentation, so another important step. Then we started with some MVPs. Like I said, if you try and personalise your entire site or your smartphone app up front, you'll probably fail. So it's a big job. So we started with a couple of things that were high impact and high volume. And the other reason this was important for us to do it that way is in New Zealand, we don't have a massive population. So if you try and segment too much, you'll end up with a really small number. So we started with our smartphone app and the home screen. So our smartphone app is also powered by the Adobe mobile SDK. So we could actually have a part of our home screen that we could personalise. And then we also personalise on the home page, and this is the example here. So we had the banner at the top that would change depending on what you looked at. So if you were browsing iPhone pages, for example, left the site and came back to the home page, you would see a banner or an offer that related to iPhone. And some of the results from this personalisation was also quite impressive. So with the phone ones, iPhone and Samsung, the click-through to the next page, which was the device gallery page, increased by 50% just by having a personalised banner. And then also the click-through to the next page, the device detail, as in, oh yeah, I think I'm interested, I want to see a lot more, increased by 53%. And then more importantly, sales conversion increased by 79%. And this is just by changing an image on the homepage. So, it's really amazing what you can achieve. That's not the end though. So we've got a roadmap, some of which we're working on at the moment. So one of the things is authenticated personalisation. So for those customers who've logged in before and then come back to our site, we sort of make a guess on what we think is the most important thing you're trying to do on our site and show it to you. So, hey, just a reminder, your bill's due. Do you want to pay that now? Or, for example, looks like you're running low on credit. Do you want to top up? Or if it's someone who regularly comes and logs into My Spark, let's serve up the login screen. Just make it easy for customers to do what they need to do. The other thing we're doing is democratizing the data. So traditionally within our business, like a lot of businesses, data was sort of held within one team. And if other people wanted access to that, they'd have to come ask that one team, who would have to prioritize to help you and then find it for you. So we've got a digital optimization chapter or team. Yes, we're agile now, so we have different terminology. And the role of that team is really to educate the tribes and the squads about the data that's available, to understand the performance of their digital journeys, and to help them look at how they could optimize those digital journeys. The other thing we're looking at is cross-channel. So we've been doing a lot around our own sites and using Adobe solutions extensively across our own sites, but now what we're trying to do is how do we connect what we know about our customers on our sites with what they're doing out in digital media or in off-site. So for example, suppression. We place a lot of ads on sites in New Zealand for people to come buy Spark things. Well, wouldn't it be great if we didn't actually market to our existing customers? Because they've already got our products. So we're working on how we do that. And also continuing the conversations. So if a customer has looked at something on our site and then they're browsing somewhere else, well, let's remind them that, hey, you can continue looking at that. Yes. The other thing we've been looking at and changing is ways of working. So in the past, how we used to work was very much around projects. Everything required a project if you wanted to get something done. There was a lot of focus on business casing, on creating extensive requirements, and then sign-offs. And sign-offs meant quite a few people. So it took a while to kind of get underway and do things. We had vendors and agencies working separately, so sort of hard to deliver that consistent customer experience in a timely way when we've got all these teams to coordinate. We talked a lot about prioritization. We don't know if we always achieved it well, but we talked a lot about prioritization. And analytics was really not seen as that important in the past. And it was often de-scoped. And I'm sure you've remember projects where reporting is always the thing that's like, we've run out of time, we've got to get this thing live, we'll sort out reporting later. Well, that's changing. So we've jumped into an agile world. We've just recently flipped our entire organisation to agile at scale. We're 1 month in, so we're still figuring out how we're doing this. One of the first things we did, though, before we flipped the whole company to agile was we just started trying some more agile ways of working. And one of the things we did was we set up a number of digital squads. One of them was personalisation and analytics. Now, in the past, no one would have prioritised this spend to dedicate a team to analytics. There were more sexy things like delivering a new buy journey or something. Sorting out analytics was not seen as important before. So the fact that we had this dedicated team who were the ones who really worked through all these foundations was just amazing. And they started working in more agile ways and we kind of learnt together. I mentioned the digital optimization chapter before. We also have a whole tribe that's dedicated to data and automation, which is a real asset. And then one of the other areas of the business is data adoption. So within that, we also have marketing automation as a chapter, but also data adoption in general. So helping the business understand what data is available, how they can use that data, get insights from that data, and make data-driven decisions. Now, I'm not saying that we're totally solved everything on the left with what's on the right. There's still a little bit of work to do, but we've got the framework and the foundation in place now to do things better. So that's our journey for how we've jumped into personalisation. So I'll just talk through a bit of a scorecard for some of the things we've achieved and also, more importantly, what we've learned. So this is an example of one of the cross-channel campaigns that we've run. So this is our smartphone app. This is kind of the home screen or the overview page when you first launch the app. And you'll see down the bottom it says order your Galaxy S9 today. That was placed there because that customer had gone to our website and viewed some pages about the Samsung, and there was an iPhone one as well. Don't worry, we love iPhone and Samsung equally. Well, I love iPhone more. Now, the average engagement value or click-through for that was, as you can see, 394% higher than the people who didn't see that banner. It's pretty amazing. The other one we've been trialling is welcome programs. So we've developed some screens to sort of remind customers about certain features, or for new customers, educate them on things that are available through the app. And this is an example of one for mobile postpaid customers. And this one had an 84% uplift of people actually going through the tasks that was promoted here. So huge improvement. So what we've learned. Really important that prioritisation and decision making is informed by data. It actually, in many ways, makes it easier rather than the old gut-based emotive place of the past, having the data to inform those decisions. We also found that it's good to get some experienced experts to help with learning and getting underway. We did partner with an Adobe partner to help us with using Target and Audience Manager and understanding the practices that we needed to do to use those. Equally important, though, is to create some internal expertise. You can't solely outsource all of that. You need some internal expertise as well. Cross-functional teams, this is something I bang on about a lot. Cross-functional teams are so important. This is not something that marketing can solve by themselves, or the design team can solve by themselves, or IT can solve by themselves. You need everyone working together to achieve these kind of outcomes, particularly at the beginning, but I think important the whole way through. The other one was test, learn, and iterate. Don't try and get the whole thing perfect. Just pick an area to start. And then what you'll find as well is, as you start doing things and sharing the results, it helps to create more buy-in so you can do more things. Also, when you're thinking about personalisation and optimisation, it's not all about buying products. For us, there was a huge opportunity to personalise in the service or the retention space. And as I said, start with targeting high volume and high impact areas, because you'll see some good results to help you learn. Okay, playbook. If we were to do this whole thing all over again, knowing what we know now, this would be the playbook. Okay, so first of all, get clear on where you want to be and dream a little. To quote Simon Sinek, start with why. Why do you exist and what are you trying to achieve? It's the most important place to start. Number 2 is also really important. Find someone else who believes and is mad enough to help you. This is a mission. That the education and buy-in piece at the start, and even actually some of the pieces we did along the way, took a lot of conversations. It took a lot of convincing people. There's one particular decision, it took me 6 months of ongoing conversation before I got a particular part of the business to agree to what we're doing. So you might hear no a few times, or you might hear why you can't do something. So you need some good support for those conversations. Really important, though, to get clear on where you are now. Where is your customer data? What are you measuring today? What are your people capabilities like? Really important to understand that current state, so that you don't leap into something and then go, oh no, we haven't figured that out. It's good to start with that. Then once you got that, create that roadmap. Start with a draft. You never know, it might be what you implement. But it's really important to know where you are today, where you want to be, and kind of the big chunks of how you're going to get there. And it might change a little bit, that's okay, but as long as you have a bit of a guide. Start with the education and gaining buy-in. Really, really important. But equally important, I don't think I put it on here, is sometimes you just got to get started. Sometimes perhaps you don't have full permission from every man and his dog. Just get started, and you'll use the success to gain momentum and get further buy-in. Set up the foundations. Foundations are not sexy projects, but they're so important. Otherwise, the other stuff doesn't work properly. Get clear on who your customers are and who you're targeting. Do you actually have a single view of your customers? Really important. Choose one place to start. Like I said, if you try and start by personalizing your whole website, your whole app, it's really hard. Just choose one place and learn from that. Create some really clear goals so you know what success looks like, but it also helps to funnel your activities and what you're doing. And share your learning, both good and bad. It was one thing that we were doing in our portfolio that we'd set up, and we're starting to play with some agile ways, is we ran this event once every 6 weeks, which we called a TAP forum. TAP doesn't stand for anything. The idea is that you tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, what are you doing? So we had each of our squads was playing back what they were working on and demoing what they've been doing. They were so successful at getting buy-in and educating the business around what we were doing. In fact, the first one that we ran, I think we invited a smaller group. Then I had these other people across the business going, hey, I heard that forum was amazing. How do I get a copy of the presentation? Or how can I see it? So we did a repeat performance and ran it again. So those kind of things of sharing is really effective. And then really use your success and learnings to extend into other channels and other customer journeys, because you're never going to be done with this. It continually evolves. Thank you.